Ladies and gentlemen, gamers, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be all about the new update and the new balance patch that hit this morning. We're going to dive into the developer live stream by Relic Entertainment, and then we're going to jump into the patch notes after that. For any new players to the channel, I wait to watch the live stream and read the patch notes until I'm doing it live with you guys. So this is going to be my first run through all of this. I'm going to give you guys my feedback and then look forward to the new meta, the new update, and let's see what's in store.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this fun discussion and chat with our balance designers here for the Company of Heroes 3 team. My name is John. I'm one of the community managers, and we've got some familiar faces, some new faces. Let's go around the room and introduce everyone. Jason, let's start with you. Who are you? How might players know you, and what do you do on the team?
Hey, everyone. I'm Jason. I'm a designer leading balance on Company of Heroes 3. Some of you might know me as Tarnations, but I haven't used that username in a minute here. But yeah.
Back in your competitive 2v2 days.
Yes, back
in the old days.
And first time on stream with us, Darren, who are you?
Hey.
How might players know you? And what do you do on the team?
Hey, you might formerly know me as Mirage Flub. But yeah, I'm Darren. I'm also one of the balance designers on the team for Company of Heroes 3. You
Awesome.
might have known me for doing a bunch of the balance work in Company of Heroes 2 during the community era as well.
Yeah, so great to have you both here. So, folks, we've got a bunch to cover today. We mentioned this beforehand, but we're probably going to keep this nice and short, as today's update is a little bit smaller. But we still got a lot to talk about. And again, if you want to stay up to date with everything on Company of Heroes, you're going to want to follow us on your social platform of choice: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube at Company of Heroes. You can find our forums, community.companyofheroes.com, and join our Discord at discord.gg/Company of Heroes. And of course, follow us on Twitch so you can find out when we're doing live streams just like this at Relic Entertainment. So today we're going to be doing a brief outline of the balance tuning patch, which is releasing after this broadcast. And then we'll be talking a bit about our future update cadence. Like I said, today's patch features a small number of targeted changes. Jason, I think you described this to me as like tidying up after, or sort of tidying up gameplay balance after Emerald Bear. So like I said, we'll keep things brief. Then we're going to get into the state of Co3's multiplayer, and we'll talk about some of the balance team's future goals. So I guess we can just kind of get right down to things. Let's maybe start with a quick overview on the changes coming in today's 1.2.3 update, following up on Emerald Bear, which was 1.2.0. So Darren, can you maybe talk about some of the items that we're going to be adjusting today?
All right, so yeah, 1.23 is mainly just a cleanup of like 1.2. It's not going to be like a giant meta shift for the game. It's just mainly a bunch of cleanup. So there's a few like underused items that are going to get tuned up, and also like clean up to say some of the bugs like our autocannon. Instead, ended up
a lot of
firing
bugs.
faster, but it also gave us an opportunity to tune like a few of the less impressive autocannon units, let's say the CWT truck, as well as the 250/9 half track. And there's also a few more items like the Vespi, which we're moving more in line with the Bishop.
What about like some of the air and anti-air stuff? Jason, are we touching anything there with this update?
Yeah. We have a pretty wanted fix in, so your vehicles will stop rotating to shoot their invisible in AA. And we're going to be continuing to do AA. So we have some minor changes in this patch, but we're going to save a lot of the other ones for the upcoming and the one after, because AA is going to be an ongoing process.
Yeah, there's a bigger thing we want to do with anti-air, but we couldn't get it in for this patch. Once we get it in for an upcoming patch, AA should feel much better.
Okay, so just to clarify what they said they did change is previously, in the previous patch, if airplanes, recon, anything was flying over your tanks and your tanks had the upgraded machine gun, your tanks would rotate to shoot at the airplanes. So they're removing that. They're making it less so that your armor is not moving, when you're not commanding it to, which is really nice. Anti-air definitely needs some work. Both Jason and Darren alluded to that, and they understand that. So they're going to be addressing that, I think, in the following updates, which is great to see, guys. It's just, it's an iterative process. It's going to take time, but I think the one thing that I love is that they know what the issue is and they're working towards it. So it's just a matter of time, you know. Anti-air before was too strong. Now it's kind of a little too weak. So they're going to get that in between, right? Moving forward. So that's good to see. Let's continue.
That's good to hear. So Darren, is there anything else that we're doing in today's patch? Again, I know it's a bunch of bug fixes and some minor tweaks and changes. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to call out to players?
In terms of like big items, there's nothing really major, as I said once again, but there's a few things like the breakthrough firebombing run will now be faster, or because it was way too slow because I was using the carpet bombing style run. And there's like a few items that are going to be like far more impressive now. Oh, like the Stoss Troop and STG 44, and there's also fixing of like one of the bugs where we had units revealing themselves in the fog of war that allowed you to drop off maps on them.
that was a pretty fun one I saw. So that'll be a nice change.
Okay, really interesting comments from Darren. Okay, number one, the firebombing run from the Wehrmacht. It is a little bit slow. I understand that. And I did feel that intuitively. I was like, man, this comes in really late when I drop it in. If I'm dropping it in on MGs or anti-tank guns or static weaponry. Of course, it's really good against the hyperstatic stuff like British artillery emplacements, 17-pounders, things like that, buildings, right, garrison units. But here's the thing. If it's too fast, it's too strong. Because what the firebomb should be is something that completely repositions your opponent's army. That's the, like, in terms of design, I think that should be the focus. Like, forcing your opponent's army to reposition is really important, and that's what it does. What it also does, because it's a firebomb, of course, is there's that residual damage that it does over time if you don't move out of the area. So not only are you being forced to move out of the area as the opposing player, but you can't reclaim the area for quite a while. So I don't know if it's currently too slow, but what I'm trying to say is I hope it's not too fast because it gets the job done. So we'll see again how they're doing that. The upgrade to the Stoss Troop, I think, is fantastic. I think they need to upgrade that. So that's great to see.
People can't do that anymore. Jason, any other final thoughts about today's patch before we kind of get into the meat of what we're talking about?
Yeah. So, and this is probably a good segue anyway. But I don't think we've really talked about kind of our cadence in terms of balance changes. So kind of the thing going on is we'll have major releases where we do major changes. So this is like your 1.2, your 1.1, or 1.15 we called it, sorry. And then we will have these minor patches afterwards to allow us to like address any outstanding issues. And also mostly like I said, we're going to be doing some tidying up of like some units that maybe got adjusted in the wrong way or just completely fell out of favor or stuff like that. So like we had the stuff. So like one of the big changes is like the CWTAA. That unit has been difficult to use, let's say, for the longest time. We're doing some adjustments to it, and we're also adjusting like the unit like the WESP, which we knew was kind of really hard to use as well. So that's another unit that's getting some changes.
So the WESP, if you guys aren't familiar with this unit, it is the mechanized artillery on the mechanized battle group for Wehrmacht on the way right-hand side of the tree at the way bottom. So instead of the Panther, it's the WESP, and it's an artillery piece. Buffing that, I think, is a great idea. I think what it needs is more area damage, more area of effect impact, because currently it's very specific, and it's targeted, and it's relatively small and not very impactful. So I hope to see that.
But for these minor patch follow-ups, we're trying to not massively shift the meta. We're going to save that for the next upcoming patch.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear. And like you were saying, we're kind of moving to this new update cadence of, sort of releasing a larger update like Emerald Bear and then having a smaller sort of tidy up update a month later.
Yeah.
So that's kind of going to be the plan moving forward. And we'll have, you'll be able to see that more clearly in our fall and winter roadmap, which
Interesting.
we're hoping to release soon. Still waiting on a couple things, but we'll get that out to everyone as soon as we can. So Jason, I guess my other question is, in terms of like cadence and future planning, did we get everything into Emerald Bear that you wanted to, or was there anything that, because I know like Emerald Bear on paper looks like a pretty large update, but I remember talking to you privately, you're like, well, there were still some things that we didn't get in that we wanted to.
So we for 1.2 in particular, I'm like a lot of people noticed this, but the balance side of the changes was much smaller than our usual major releases. One of the reasons behind this was because we put a lot of effort into feature work. So like a lot of the things that was in 1.2 was actually like changes to pathfinding, quality of life changes to a lot of the abilities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of effort prioritizing that. Moving forwards, we're not that was kind of an anomaly. So just in terms of setting expectations for like the next major patch, there will be more meaningful changes that are aimed to kind of shift how multiplayer is kind of played.
And we do have quite a bit more, or that we have been working on.
Yeah,
on the wings.
but we also did quite a lot of data cleanup in 1.2 as well. I'm not sure if people saw, but there's like a table that Darren populated that basically we corrected a lot of the movement of like the entire roster of vehicles, which is a small amount. This was a less noticeable change, but moving forwards, it makes it much easier for us to make adjustments because now that all the vehicle stats actually talk to each other properly, we can then make corrections more easily. So yeah.
Okay, no, that's great to hear. So let's maybe talk about a bit of a juicier topic, and that is the state of balance and multiplayer in Company of Heroes 3.
Interesting topic.
So how do we feel things are kind of looking right now? Darren, let's maybe start with you. How do you kind of feel about like just the current state of multiplayer balance across the game? Maybe when it comes to faction balance or battle groups or play style. How are you kind of feeling right now?
And real quick, guys, this guy Darren on the balance team, it's our first time seeing him, but I actually played with the Relic team on one of their live streams about a month ago, and Darren was on my team. This guy doesn't pull any punches. This guy goes all out. I mean, he was going hard, crushing the other devs. So I've got faith in this guy. I feel like he knows what he's doing.
In terms of faction balance, I would say both you and me, Jason, agree that like USF and Wehrmacht are in a fairly good place, and especially in terms of like their diversity, win rates, and what you can or cannot use. Where the Africa factions tend to fall a bit more, in particular, to more mono-dimensional play style, just being reliant on very specific units. So we're hoping that we can start pushing them to have more build options and some variety, particularly for the DAC.
Yeah. But like ever since one of the third-party sites updated, I don't want to get the name wrong, but I think it's Go3 Stats. Now that like win rates are out, like for the most part, we're pretty confident in the win rates average across all of our factions. We know there's an imbalance right now in like 4v4 in particular right now, but like we're pretty happy with the win rates that are achieving for like USF and Wehrmacht again, and they're also achieving it with a meaningful amount of variety, amount of build and strategic diversity. So we're kind of thumbs up there. But what we're not thumbs up on is like UKF and DAC. While they are competitive, they have major flaws in terms of like,
100%.
for example, in hyper competitive, DAC is kind of unfavored because they have some poor interactions with USF, and also the way a lot like UKF, for example, is good. Can often just mean spamming certain units over and over again, which is not ideal. So we're going to be shifting a lot of our focus in the future to really like flesh out these factions, make sure that all of their options are interesting and viable, and there's meaningful strategic diversity to them and to their battle groups as well.
Okay, no, that's good to hear. What about battle group balance? I know that's something that you're also looking at.
So before we get into battle group balance, it's really interesting that they're balancing the game for every mode. I mean, Jason already mentioned 4v4 mode. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the game develops. I personally, being a team game player, much more than any 1v1s, I really like to see that consideration. It's a really hard act to balance because 1v1 and 4v4 are very different games, so it's not easy, and it's something that's going to take time. Once again, um, you really want the slow, tried and true process over any crazy, um, quick changes. And you want information and data, and I think that's the biggest thing. It's going to take a year or so for all that data to come in and for them to really understand, okay, this is the direction and change we need to go. And even changes they make now is all based on gathering more data. So I love the fact that they not only design the factions for team play, they complement each other, right? Some of their weaknesses and strengths, but they're also balancing the game for all the modes, which is not something you always see. StarCraft, for example, is not balanced for team games. It's purely balanced for 1v1. Let's continue.
So yeah, so at a high level, we think again USF and Wehrmacht are in a much better place than the six battle groups for our African factions, Africa theater factions. Sorry. In terms of diversity, we know there are still some that are stronger than others. I know Armored comes to mind for a lot of our USF players and well everyone really. So that's definitely on our radar. But for the most part, we think there's a lot of meaning. Like the best thing is there's a lot of meaningful diversity here, which is good. However, at the same time, there are some things that are just not as good, even though the battle groups are good. So one of the things that is on our radar is like defensive play, especially like emplacements in particular. Field defenses, we kind of like dub all of the things like bunkers, sandbags, wires, mines, all that stuff, isn't in the best place right now. So that's another thing. I believe, the last time we came up and talked about balance, we talked about a lot of the parts of the game that we were uncomfortable with or like that we wanted to move forwards improving. I think we've done meaningful changes in all of those areas up until now. So like this is kind of a new update of like what are some of those new fields are, and field defenses is definitely one of them.
Okay. Darren, what about you? What are your kind of thoughts on maybe not just battle groups, but like play styles within those battle groups and factions?
I think for at least 3 of the factions in particular, so we're talking about USF, the USF, Wehrmacht, and even to the British, they have fairly good at least among their battle groups diversity and like ways to play them. In particular, DAC tends to be much harder in terms of getting their diversity, just because they are very reliant on specific things or needing specific tools that counter particularly USF in general, which makes some of their battle groups a bit harder to use.
Okay.
And another note is it depends on what kind of mode you play as well. Like UKF, I think, is in a bit of a better place than 4v4. They're a little too strong right now, but like in terms of diversity, they're in a better place. But if you go and play UKF in 1v1, their diversity immediately suffers for a few different reasons. So like we're keeping our eye on all modes. So like we're not just balancing just for one mode in particular. We want to make sure that the game is interesting play for all factions, all battle groups, and all modes, which is a lofty goal, but we're trying our best and we're spending a lot of time trying to hit these goals.
Yeah. Jason, I know you often talk about like some of the high level pillars in terms of like balance. So I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are on like how those play into the current state and what you might be thinking about in terms of like how should we tackle some of these things.
I think the biggest one that we're going to be focusing on and we're going to be talking a lot about is strategic diversity. Like we've built a lot of different features, a lot of different mechanics and playstyles into the game, but we haven't had all of the time to really flesh all of them out. Field defenses is one. Another one is like kind of like our stealth and our camo, like our sneaky play, basically. Artillery is also not like unworkable. It's not in the best of spots either. So these are just three examples of like parts of the game that we really want to continue to improve.
Okay. What about you, Darren? Is there anything in terms of like the design philosophy or the pillars around balance that you're kind of thinking about right now?
In terms of the design philosophies, no, we've been trying to focus on all our game modes. So like we want like strategic diversity for like all the factions in very scary modes. We don't want it just like, oh, this faction's only good in 1v1, but the moment they go into 3v3 or 4v4, their win rates would like plummet it down previously, like USF was for quite a bit of time before Emerald Bear.
Okay. Is there anything else that we want to cover in terms of like the current state before we start talking about like what's to come?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're kind of talking with both interchangeably here.
Sure.
Like one thing I'll mention is another thing we're keeping our eye on is veterancy. We know like veterancy is kind of hit and miss on some units. Like some units vet way too fast, some vet too slow. Some units vet are really meaningful and cool, and some are not.
I noticed that.
So
I noticed
that's
that.
going to be
That's-
another thing on the docket that you'll see us work towards in the future.
That's big.
When I mean future, I mean like in like winter and fall and whatnot. Like in not like not everything's next patch. So I like manage.
It's on our radar.
Yeah,
it's
it's
just not
managing
something,
expectations. But yeah, these are kind of our future things. Because like if you look back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier about like team weapons were basically unplayable for the first few months after launch. I think we've gone very far from that original launch window, where an anti-tank gun was basically a trap and you never wanted to buy one.
Yeah.
So yes.
Okay. No, that's great to know. So more specifically about some of those future goals. Like I said, we're going to be showing off the fall and winter roadmap soon. So that's coming soon. I know we keep saying that, but it's sooner than the last time I said soon. So what do we have in store when it comes to balance? Darren, I know we were kind of before this talking a little bit about like the intra-faction balance. Is there anything specifically there that you're hoping to address?
For the big one, I believe is our big one, particularly after watching some of the tournaments, is getting the battle groups who's more in place with each other. Or so we want to correct a few issues there. We still want the battle groups to be viable and you can play with them, without needing to go specific routes. But we do want to tone down some of the more egregious things with some of the battle groups.
Yeah.
Okay, so interesting point. The battle groups, there are some battle groups that are just inherently stronger than others. So I would like to see, more variety and options. The one thing that I will say, like if you look at Co 1, for example, the call-ins in Co 1, and here's the thing, I'll say this before I even comment. I don't think call-ins are as powerful as people claim they are. And I could get a lot of flack for that, I understand. But if you look at Orange Pest's play, you look at his tournament run, he's demonstrated, I think, the amount of complexity in the game strategically, the build orders, and how call-ins are not necessarily as strong. And that's my take on it. But here's the thing. With that said, I still think call-ins should be more expensive. If you look at Company of Heroes 1, the reason why vehicles and units were not just auto-spammed call-in, right, constantly, is because they were more expensive, period, right? They cost more manpower. So I think, of course, there's tweaking you have to make. You don't want to make them obsolete because call-ins are a really cool and fun part of Co. Like I love the call-in feature and mechanic, even though I know a lot of players do not like it at all. Now, the other thing you can do with the battle groups that is really interesting, and I think they're probably looking at, is you can require a tech structure to call in a unit. So, for example, you look at Wehrmacht and you have the Tiger tank, or you look at USF, Armored Battle Group, and you have the Easy 8. The Easy 8, if it required the tank depot to be built first before Easy 8s can be deployed, you would have a large cost of manpower and fuel, 120 fuel roughly, before you can even build an Easy 8, which is roughly the same cost, right? So, and same with the Tiger. If you would need the Panzer Company or the Tier 3 structure tech before you can call in the Tiger, it really changes the implications in the timing of the Tiger and how powerful it is. I don't think the Tiger is that strong or particularly strong where you would need to do that. But I'm just giving an example. There's a lot of things that they can do with the battle groups to tweak and adjust their power and so forth. So, and to stop the spamming of the units. So anyways, let's continue.
I'm allowed to do a shout out to AE
Sure.
for
Yeah,
a fantastic tournament.
Yeah.
I definitely watched all the games and got a lot of a lot of fun out of it, but also a lot of information out of it. So we're also making some adjustments in response to a lot of the things we saw, for example. But yeah, in terms of like diversity, like we know like if we're talking specifics, like like part of Wehrmacht's tech tree is a little bit underpowered at the moment. Like no one really goes for certain units. We also know that like for
Okay, what does he mean by that? And I think what he means by that, and this is something I've noticed about Wehrmacht. Um, Wehrmacht tier 1 is relatively weak, not that weak, but the Grenadier is weak. The MG is of course extremely powerful, and you're going to always see a couple MGs generally. But when you get into Luftwaffe company, tier 2A and tier 2B, they're very awkward for the Wehrmacht, in my opinion, because there are a lot of units in those techs that are just not used. They're not that strong. So when I look at Luftwaffe company, the Jaeger is like my go-to unit because of its utility and anti-tank capabilities. But then I look at other units that I really love from the franchise, like the Martyr and the Whirlwind, and I'm like, these units are just too weak, too expensive. They're not that strong, you know. And I feel like Wehrmacht is stuck in this awkward place where you're kind of like defaulted to a set of units. So yeah, anyways, I think that's what he means when he says that, but I'm not sure.
For USF, certain strats are just way better than others, especially if you look away from versus Wehrmacht and into DAC. You basically have like one or two ways to kind of like really push them around. So we're going to be making some adjustments to that as well. And then shifting our focus to the other factions again, we know like when they're good, but they're like very like reliant on certain things that we kind of want to spread out. Yeah.
So one of the other things that I think we were talking about before the stream, and we kind of touched on already, was like systems balance. So you mentioned veterancy. Is there anything else there that we're hoping to address in the coming months?
Well, we've already mentioned it before, but I said 1.23 is didn't get all the anti-air changes that we wanted to do, but the one after, we definitely have now systems in place to allow us to tune the anti-air to be better, and it should allow them to feel much more responsive. In particular, anti-air will now be able to just fire at planes that are out of the border regions of the map, where prior anti-air would maybe get like 1 to 2 seconds to shoot at planes before they could do anything. But we also got like a lot more work that's not just balance related, but we wanted to surface more information to the player, in the terms of like our various abilities and upgrades. So, going forth, there should be now values for a lot of like the abilities and the
Cool.
upgrades to better tell the player what this provides.
That's awesome.
So like,
I love that.
let's say I bought improvised armor for the Americans. You'll now understand like how much armor each of your vehicles is going to get for
That is
for the
sweet.
upgrade.
Thank
as well
you.
as like sprint for Panzer Grenadiers, like how much faster they're going to move and how much harder they are to hit while they are running.
Cool.
Okay, no, that's fantastic to hear. I'm definitely looking forward to some of those improvements, because obviously the more information that a player has, the better. Jason, was there anything else in terms of systems balance? I know we already talked about the British forces and the DAC. Was there anything like specific that you kind of wanted to like dig in there?
So two things. So quickly, going off Darren's point.
Piggybacking.
Along with the numerical changes to tooltips, so we're going to be showing a lot more values. So like, rather than you do more damage, it's like maybe 30% more damage. We'll give you more rough aggregates where we can. But another thing that's going alongside with this is we are trying to improve the quality of some of the abilities in the game. We know some abilities are just a little way too good for how little effort you need to put into them, or some of them are just really difficult to use, or they go against like the idea of the unit. There's quite a few different issues. We're
also toning down some of the abilities that might do too many things at once. Looking at you, or Seek and Destroy in particular, and your 5 bonuses.
Yeah. So that's going to be an ongoing thing. That has been an ongoing thing since launch. We've been trying to adjust abilities as we've gone, but like going forwards, that's another big area. But yeah, specifically for UKF and DAC, we're keeping an eye on half-track deployment. and the training center in particular. These two systems are interesting, and there's a lot of promise to them, but they're not quite hitting the mark in terms of like,
Agreed.
Like some of them are a little like railroady in terms of what you get. So like you get 5 sections and then you get the upgrade, right? We want to make it so that like it's more adaptable, that you don't always do the same thing every game, and also there's like different viable paths to go rather than like you always get this unit if you're using half-track deployment, or always get this upgrade if you're going Brits, for example.
Super cool, guys. And I think this is really the strength of Co 3 compared to Co 2. Co 2 is a lot more linear. There's a lot less options, in my opinion. Of course, you have a plethora of commanders. There's so many commanders over the past decade that have been released. So there's that variety. But if you're looking at the tech infrastructure in the game, the tech trees, if you're looking at the strategic variety in the game, the upgrades, if you're looking at the build order potential, right, where you're taking a build order, right, a certain path of acquisition, so units and upgrades, right, that make one specific strategy strong, but make other things not viable for you, right? So you're taking a literal path and you're compromising in one way so that you can benefit in another way. Very, very, very good in Co 3 compared to Co 2. I think it's a strength that StarCraft has, right? Where you have these really, really cool build orders and different tech paths. What Co 3 is going to do really well, I think, is that strategic variety over time. It's going to have a lot of different strategies that are viable. And I think what they're trying to do now is say, okay, we want to give players options. We want to have that variety. We need to bring some other units up to par. We need to open up some things, or maybe strengthen some things. So I really like the overall fundamental just game design. You know what I mean? Like, I think Co 3 is in a really good spot in this regard compared to Co 2. So yeah, I'm really happy about that, and I think having different tech paths, different options, is going to be great. So let's continue.
Okay. What about battle groups? Is there anything that we specifically like? Maybe we don't get into the nuts and bolts of the details of what we want to change or address there, but is there anything about battle groups that we want to do in the future, Darren?
In terms of the battle groups, at least for 1.3, you probably shouldn't expect like giant reworks to like all the abilities and units, but we are definitely doing large like touch-ups and boosts to things that
I can't wait to see the patch notes.
Definitely underperforming either in 1v1 or the team games.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of changes, like we target a lot of changes at the DAC battle groups to make their units feel better.
Good.
Like the North African factions, their battle groups, while there's a lot of interesting stuff in there, and they are quite powerful, they don't quite integrate as well into people's strategies as much as the Wehrmacht or the USF ones are. That's kind of the biggest issue with them. So like some of them actively are just difficult to fit into your build order. Like UKF Commandos comes to mind as a specific example. So these are things we kind of want to improve, whether that's like, we're not quite sure exactly what those adjustments will be, but this is definitely something we're keeping our eye on.
Yeah. I saw someone in the chat just ask about selection boxes. That is something that we're looking at.
Oh, yeah.
In the future, but we are
a little too sticky.
So what about play style balance? I know this is something, Jason, you kind of called out before we started. What do we want to do with play style balance, and what do you even mean by play style balance?
Yeah. So again, I think we've harped on this term a little bit too much, this stream in particular. But like in terms of diversity of like strategies, right? Yeah. Especially in like, but this matters to all modes. But like for example, in 4v4, we know that our game is a little bit more aggressive than like the traditional titles, and that's to a degree fine. But we definitely want to make sure that if you want to be that turtle, that really annoying turtle in that corner of the map, that we allow you to do that kind of gameplay. Mm-hmm. So there's quite a few different initiatives going towards enabling that kind of play. So again,
fantastic. I love it.
Improvements to field defenses, but also just a few adjustments to like how artillery works and other things like that. And again, the other one was like being sneaky and doing all kinds of like interference with your opponent. That's also part of the game that we have multiple units that cloak, that can invis and kind of stealth around, but not all of them are well integrated, or some of them are a little underpowered, etc. Like the stuff of this nature. So like we want to make it so that, hey, if you want to play the game in a different way, you can. And we also want to support that with as many different factions as we can as well. So we don't just want it to be like, if you want to do X, you can only do it with Y faction.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think for playstyles, it's not just also like the type, but also just within the faction tech trees themselves. We want it so like player A doesn't always go down like the A path for like specific factions. It's because we do have that wide variety of tech options amongst the factions, and so we do want players to at least use them all, at least through a variety of games, and not just always, build 5 of the same unit and hope for the best.
We have quite a few specialist units that we know that people aren't quite engaging as much with for several reasons. So, like they could be hard to fit, or they could just not be that attractive immediately, or some of them are underpowered. We're keeping our eye on these units and seeing how we can integrate them. We don't want to force them, for example. Like we don't want to make it so that, oh, suddenly this thing is so strong that you have to use it, right? That's not the goal. The goal is more just so that if you want to use that, or if you and your buddies like develop a strat where you can specialize to X, Y, you can. Right now, I don't think you can. So that's kind of the goal.
So like I know this StarCraft analogy probably won't work, but it's what I have most experience in, so I'll use this as an example. The Terran faction, for example, has 2 different major playstyles. And if there's a ton of different playstyles in terms of like a player, how he plays. But in terms of the faction, you can go mechanized or you can go bio, right? So infantry or armor. Let's just use that as the example. So the armor style of play, the mechanized style of play, it's called mech. It's based on a lot of tanks and slow-moving units. So it's a very defensive playstyle. The infantry style, the bio style, is much more aggressive. You're dropping, you're using medevacs, you're harassing. You've got these quick, nimble units, right? So it's much more aggressive in nature. I think that would be really cool to see in this game. If you take the USF faction, for example, and you have the barracks and you have the weapon support center, well, naturally, the barracks is more aggressive. You have the mortars and you have the riflemen to break positions. You have the jeep, right, which is hypermobile and aggressive, right? And then you have the weapon support center, which is like very support-based, very defensive, allows you to zone territory. But it's not exactly, it's like hard counter type of style, right? Defensive, you're able to more easily hard counter and hold positions. So I would like to see like, and that's a very basic example, but I'd like to see more viability between the two, where the weapon support center is like stronger to open with, And I think the faction design is there. There's a lot of variety. I just think it needs a little tweaking, like Jason is alluding to. And I would like to see that for every faction, I love the idea of the British faction and the Indian artillery having that artillery defensive playstyle. The perimeter overwatch, all these defensive tools. I would love to see players be able to lean into that strategically. But let's continue.
What about some specific, perhaps units or aspects of multiplayer that we're trying to take a look at in terms of that playstyle balance? I know in my notes here you mentioned support and reconnaissance units. What do you want to touch on there?
Yeah, so like quite a few of our recon units are in varying places. Like some of them are actually way too good, so like they're powerful combat unit, but they also do extremely well recon. While some units are really good at recon, but like you don't really value it when you buy them, or for different reasons. So this is another thing that we want to look at. Also, the recon system as a whole isn't in the best place, which we want to kind of improve if we can. Darren, anything you want to mention on that?
In terms of units that we have been looking up, there are a few who there's no particular for class, but we have been taking a look at quite a few out of the assault units for particular in DAC. So the Gustatory and the Assault Grenadiers to make them more viable.
Versus as well.
Yep, a lot of the DAC infantry we've been looking at because while Panzer Grenadiers with all their upgrades are a very good unit, they generally also outcompete both the battle group units for the deck as well as the various specialists who obviously are more vulnerable or leave gaps in the roles compared to like fully upgraded Panzer Grenadiers with 6 mans and grenades.
Yeah.
Well, what about emplacements? I know there's a bit of balance tuning that we want to do there as well.
Yeah, the 88 was a headache at launch, and then I think we kind of overcorrected a little bit.
We're doing like one change to it for 1.23.
Yeah,
It's getting
that's
a
true.
health boost, but we want to do a bit more with emplacements rather than just making them incredibly tanky. We do want there to be like both counterplay and play to them. Of how
Smart.
they're functioning.
Yeah, there's some immediate shifts where like they're a little too underpowered right now, but moving forwards, we want to make the gameplay loop of both using emplacements but also engaging emplacements to be a bit more interesting, rather than just like you just park a mortar outside the range of like an emplacement and that's just like the gameplay loop, right? We want to improve this if we can. And like for previous games have plenty of ideas for us to draw from as well, which is another thing that like we do a lot.
Just a quick correction. Miguel, aka Devem, just yelled at me in our work chat, and he said that the selection changes are in today's update. So
Oh,
Are they?
nice.
they're not
Okay.
coming soon. They're in today's.
Nice. That's nice.
Thank
There we
you.
go.
Thank you, Devem.
That's sticky.
Credit to us.
So what they're referring to is like, so what they changed in the previous update was when you went to select your units, it was easier to do. Before you were misclicking too much when you took your cursor and you're trying to grab a single unit. Then in the recent update, you were sometimes selecting too many units, right? You would like try to select one and you'd select two. At least that was my experience. I was getting stuck like trying to box one unit at box two, or not being able to select the unit because I have both selected. So it was just a little too sticky. So that's going to be fixed. So it should be even easier to select now. And I think that's just very nice change.
So what about viability of options? I know this is sort of a more nebulous topic.
There are a lot of units and I guess upgrades or battle groups. You could say like make them viable. But yeah.
So Darren, what are you sort of looking at in terms of like the viability of like mid game options? Especially I know Jason before you were talking about like tech timings and things like that. So what are we doing there, Darren? And then maybe I'll throw it to you, Jason.
So for like particularly we've been looking at say the Wehrmacht's Luftwaffe company. I believe he has in terms of I guess units. Like we don't want to make the units like overpowering, as Jason has said, for like their tech timings, but we do want to make them like effective if for when they arrive. So either this could be things like cost reductions or performance improvements or gearing certain units to be better in dealing with the threats that they would face during that time they would be deployed.
At a higher level, two goals we're trying to hit, and again, please keep in mind these are difficult things. But one thing is we want to make it so that the mid game in particular has a little bit more depth to it. Right now, we're noticing that like you can hit the late game a little bit too quickly for a few different reasons. But we want to extend it so that there's a little bit more push and pull. And that's kind of the second thing, where there's a little bit more like I built X, so you need to build Y, so then I build Z to counter your Y kind of thing. So a little bit more back and forth in that mid-game part in particular, because we know once you reach that late game, I think there is a little bit, there's more of a balance there. But like at a high level, we definitely want to improve this overall across the game.
It's a great call.
So
It's a really good call.
Yeah, essentially forcing your opponent, like when you go certain options, to force them to react rather than them maintaining a certain path and not needing to react at all to what you've done.
Super important, guys. That is such an important point. Because in RTS games, if you have two different paths with players, or generally, let's just take player A, he's teching straight up to the mid-game tier, let's just say tier 2 tech, right? He's sacrificing something to tech quicker, and he's teching quicker to get tech-based units. So let's say I'm playing Wehrmacht, and I thin out my build, right? I'm sacrificing my tier 1 early game. Maybe I don't build an extra MG or an extra Gren, right? And I'm going to go straight up to the Luftwaffe company. I'm going to grab the Whirlwind tech. And I'm going to get a Whirlwind as fast as I can. Well, in order to get a Whirlwind really fast, that technology, my resources are going into that technology. So they're not going into army value. So that sacrifice I'm making should come at a cost if my opponent reacts appropriately to me. So if my opponent reacts appropriately, he should be able to capitalize and counteract the Whirlwind, right? But when the Whirlwind comes out, let's say, and I get the Whirlwind out super fast because I invested in that and I survived, right? With the sacrifices I made, that Whirlwind should make an impact to where my opponent has to do something and react to that unit. It should be powerful. The tech-based route should have a window of opportunity before the late game tech to where you can take control of the game or accomplish an objective rather than your opponent say, oh, it's a Whirlwind. All I need is my current tech. I could deal with it and keep teching to tier 3 and then get a, Sherman out and I'll be fine. So again, what's one example. I could give several examples of this and kind of elaborate on it, but I hope that makes sense. And I really, really love that point that they made. I think it's so important for RTS design and for having that strategic variability and options, build orders. Brainy players who have these cool build orders and tech-based build orders should be able to capitalize on them, and vice versa. Players who are playing a different style, army value-based styles, economic-based styles, should also be able to implement them. So anyways, let's continue.
So I know we don't necessarily have too much to cover. Like we said, today's update is a bit smaller, just kind of tidying up after Emerald Bear. Jason, I know you always relish the chance to be on camera, so you can kind of philosophize about balance and what we're trying to do with balance. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to get across to players as we put out today's update, but then kind of focus on some of the bigger releases that are going to be coming up in the months ahead?
Sudden big open question. Yeah, like I think we've been pretty clear with everything we wanted to do. Like our community's been great. Like I do hope we've earned a little bit of confidence or a little bit of patience with our community in terms of like maintaining relative balance throughout the game. But yeah, like please be patient, but also please give us feedback. We're constantly looking through all of the different channels that John's mentioned in terms of like where can we improve, where are some of the issues. A lot of these processes are like iterative, right? Like sometimes we recognize a unit's not that good, so we improve it, but suddenly it's
growing pains of a new game,
meta
guys.
or whatnot, and we've had that happen a few times. But like, please be patient with us. We're really trying to make a really good game here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything from you, Darren, in terms of like philosophy or what we're trying to do moving forward?
No, I think we've stated everything. Like we've stated our high-level goals of what we wanted to do for the game, and particularly for Company of Heroes 3, which is that having more playstyle options than the prior games, and having diversity within the factions. So, you're not always forced to go down specific paths. You can play with the various paths that are provided for the factions.
Okay, good to hear. Last spicy question, Jason. Collins and your philosophy on Collins, because again, like some players love him, some players hate him, but
We'll be here all day.
we'll be here all day talking about Collins. What are your plans? I guess.
Way to step on like a landmine like 5 minutes before the end of the movie, But like in terms of Collins, we definitely are aware that like. We played a lot of Code 2. We've seen where Collins have been and where they've gone. In terms of comments right now, is like we are aware right now that Collins are a little too pervasive throughout the game. In terms of what we're specifically doing to them, we definitely want them to be a little bit less oppressive in terms of strategies. So there are some upcoming changes to a lot of these things to make them a little less in your face.
Okay.
We talked about that and what they can do. There's a lot of options.
That's the best answer that we're going to get right now. So folks, like we said, it's going to be a bit of a shorter stream today. So that'll probably be it for today. Don't forget that our 1.2.3 balance tuning update is going to be releasing today, and we'll have more news.
All right, guys. So let's jump into the patch notes. All right. So Emerald Bear balance tuning 1.2.3. Let's take it from the top here. Moving forward, our team will be releasing a smaller and more focused tuning update after every major PC release. Today's update will address some outstanding issues from the release of Emerald Bear and make some tuning adjustments to multiplayer balance. You can find more information on our new update cadence for PC in our 2023 PC roadmap releasing soon. Faction balance. All right, here it's going to get interesting here, guys. I'm actually really excited that we're getting... So the new cadence or update cadence is basically, or from what I've seen, a major update every 2 months, roughly, maybe 3, I don't know. And then my guess is a major update every 2 months, and in between, right? That 1 month period in between is going to be a tuning update. So literally a month ago, we got the major update, Emerald Bear. 4 weeks later from that, we're getting this update, which is a tuning update. And then I would assume in 1 month from now, we're going to get another major update. That's my guess. But okay, faction balance. 3-inch motor team. Shells per HE barrage increased from 4 to 6. Shells per HE barrage with artillery saturation increased from 7 to 8. Okay. Yeah, so I would say that that's fine. That's warranted. Aircraft strafe plane health reduced from 280 to 240, so a little easier to shoot down. High altitude bomber plane health increased from 280 to 480. Okay, so the high altitude, that's a pretty big health increase. I don't think this strafe plane health reduction is going to make much of a difference, to be honest. I think the strafes will still land, but perhaps more AA updates to come will make this more impactful. Anti-air rubber wind, M16 quad, and the flak is going to be a range bonus increase from times 6 to times 7.5. Okay, so the anti-air is getting a little range buff. Auto cannons, the 8 rad, the 250, and the Crusader A rate of fire reduced. So there was also like a really bad bug with auto cannons as well. So that's getting a bit of a nerf, which is important because it's warranted. Bishop self-propelled gun, barrage projectiles now ignores collisions up to 75% during its flight due to the Bishop's low angle of fire. Now fires low angle shells to match the maximum elevation of its weapon. Okay, nice. 15 CMP anti-air truck, accuracy reduced. Area of effect damage set to 5.675 damage with no drop off. Area of effect now capped at 2 models. Horizontal traverse speed reduced from 160 to 100. Reload time increased from 1 to 2. Scatter ratio offset. Scatter reduced from 10 to 6.5. Weapon cooldown reduced. Okay, interesting. I don't think this thing is like that viable. You know, I'd rather just have a med truck, but I do like it. I do like it a lot. I think it's a good support unit, especially in the early stages of the game. If you call an Indian artillery motor, you just want to use that as infantry support. I think it's pretty cool. I do like it. Reveal area. Direct fire units firing from the fog war will no longer reveal the terrain they are on. That's so important. This prevents these units from being targeted by certain off-map abilities. Yeah, I think that's really, really important. This was too prevalent where units would be firing the fog war and reveal themselves and then get countered. That's a good gameplay change. Strafing runs, P-47s, Ju-87s. Suppression will not only be applied to units hit by the area of effect damage and not spread to units outside of its radius. So yeah, the strafing run, for example, would suppress units that are outside the direct strafe run. So now it's going to suppress units that are actually hit. So damage and suppression are going to go hand in hand. I like that. I think that's good. Vickers heavy machine gun team. So this is the British machine gun team. Focus gunnery accuracy increased. Okay, focus gunnery suppression reduced. So it's going to have less suppression but more accuracy. I think that... I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. Did that really, was that really necessary? I don't know. M3 Stewart penetration. Oh wait, is the Stewart getting a nerf? Penetration reduced from 120, 180 to 80, 60, 50. Reconnaissance scan. Changed from a timed ability to a toggle ability. Remains active when the vehicle is moving. Movement speed reduced by 50%. What? And disables weapon when active? No. No. Why is this Stewart getting nerfed? Is this a team game change or this can't be a 1v1 change? this would not make sense as a 1v1 change. To me, this seems like a big hit to the Brits. The Stewart is really good and strong. I love the unit. It's one of my favorite mid-game vehicles, and it can be very strong as a unit to hard counter, mid-game vehicles. But this seems a little heavy-handed, man, especially 1v1. I feel like the British need this variety with the Stewart because you're spending a lot of money to tech to this unit as well. Movement speed reduced by 50% and disables weapon when active. That, unless I'm misunderstanding something, that seems very heavy-handed. But I'm curious to see if, like, I thought that, yeah, I don't know. That's crazy to me. That's a shocking one. M3 Grant coaxial machine gun now properly tracks targets. Okay. So this was faction balance. They didn't really state which factions, but now they're stating this faction, Wehrmacht. Okay. 221 armored car. 20mm now deals very limited area of effect damage, primarily detonate objects like mines. Okay. This scout car's white phosphorus round ability no longer overlaps with its scout awareness ability. Okay. White phosphorus round is now available without veterancy for... Okay, that's good. I think that's fine. Breakthrough incendiary bombing run. Munition cost reduced from 120 to 100. That's nice. Because when you're going breakthrough, you don't have like that. You do have a large use for your munitions in terms of your tactical infantry play. But in terms of call-ins and like off-map artillery support, you don't have much. So I do like the fact that this bombing run is getting more love. Incendiary bombing run is getting more love. So you're going to have not only the reduction in cost, but you're also going to have it arrive sooner. So it now takes 8 to 9 seconds for the bomb run to impact the target area. Okay, so before I think it was up to like 10 or 11. It was quite a long time. We talked about this in the developer live stream, so you guys know my thoughts on this. Flak 36, anti-tank emplacement, health increase from 800 to 1040. Okay, that's fine. Kettenkrad recon vehicle. Reconnaissance scan changed from a timed ability to a toggle ability that remains active when moving. No way. That is sweet. That is really cool. So any of you Co 1 veterans can refresh my memory, but I think this is a Panzer Elite style change. I think this is a reference to the Panzer Elite of Co 1. And if so, I love it. I think it's a great change. Speed reduced by 50%. Okay. So if I'm accurate on this, correct me if I'm wrong, this would require Vet 1. And if it requires Vet 1, I think the Kettenkrad is more viable because, guys, in terms of build orders, you can go for officer quarters in Tier 1 to get the Vet 1 for all your Tier 1, and that includes the Kettenkrad. So immediately you can have this reconnaissance, and I think it's really sweet. I love this change. And I would like to see the Kettenkrad become a viable unit, a staple unit, because with that Vet 1 and this change, you could really make a case for communication cables being more viable, because the Kettenkrad is just like it's got more utility. It's actually found a real purpose, and I love the fact that they're going to incorporate reconnaissance more into the game, because I think it's really important to give players ability to recon beyond just simply moving their units farther up. Luftwaffe strafing run, recharge time increased from 60 to 90. Yeah, it was pretty quick. It was very quick. I do remember that. Fragmentation bombs, recharge time increased from 60 to 120. Yeah, so those were pretty quick. That's fine with me. Strasstruppen STG-44 assault rifle accuracy increased. Burst duration increase. Cost decreased from 75 to 50. I think that's good changes. Wehrmacht 8 rad signal detection range reduced from 90 to 60. Yeah, that's fine. The Wehrmacht 8 rad from the mechanized battle group is insane. It's so good. You could just spam those. You can have signal detection everywhere. It's really strong. The Wesp guys, barrage ready aim time from 2 to 0.125. Cost reduced from 400 manpower and 80 fuel to 320 manpower and 60 fuel. Okay, that's good. That's much more reasonable, because you're able to now get your tanks out as well. Creeping barrage range changed from 150 to 180. Okay. Matches standard barrages. So once again, standardizing archetypes. Creeping Barrage recharge time from 70 to 55, much quicker. Fix several issues with the Creeping Barrage. Okay. All right. Moving on to U.S. forces. Chaffee, penetration reduced. Slightly. Wow, the Stuart got more of a nerf than the Chaffee. That's shocking to me, man. I don't know why that's so surprising to me, but I feel like it's a team game change more than anything. Engineer light it up. Veterancy ability area increased from 5 to 6. Flamethrower damage increased from 5 to 8. No longer has cooldown between bursts. Okay, I think it's good. M31 US recovery vehicle fuel cost reduced to 30 from 45. Will now self-repair when out of combat. That's sweet. I love it. I love making these cool utility special units more viable. Whizbang. Damage to emplacements reduced by 25%. Range increased from 80 to 85. So we went from like 70-ish up to 80. Now 85. Dude, the Whizbang is getting some love. This is sweet, man. This is sweet. I love the Whizbang. And I love that you can use its veterancy abilities. I think they're cool in terms of playstyle and like build order, transitions. Okay, the DAC. 250 half track, 20 millimeter auto can increase by 33%, so accuracy increase. Area of effect damage set to 4 with no drop off. Area of effect now capped 2 models. Coaxial machine gun accuracy reduced by 33%. Okay. All right, that's good. Burst the area. Reinforcement cost reduced from 28 to 26. Okay, so burst the area is getting some love. I think it's important because with the recent buff to Panzer Grenadiers, the burst the areas were a little bit weaker, right? You're paying that premium, that 320 manpower to get these out, but you couldn't really make the argument for them. Their utility is not as good, right? They don't have anti-tank grenades. They have the standard grenade, but they have the passive sprinting. So the fact that they're, in terms of economy, they're more feasible. I think this is going to be on par with the P-Grens now, or at least it should be closer. I love this unit. Okay, the cannon howitzer, Canone, I think Canone. You guys could butcher me in the chat if I mispronounce this, but I think it's Canone or Canone. Yeah, I don't know. Shells per barrage increased from 4 to 6. Really, really good. I like this. I love this howitzer personally. I just love this DAC battle group. It's so good. It's so cool, at least. It's not like so good, but it's just a cool, really cool set of units. I would like to see the Gusatori get some more love, but it's in a decent place. The FAMO recovery vehicle. FAMO. Man, I'm really going to get flamed for this mispronunciation. Fuel cost reduced from 40 to 30. Panzerjäger squad health increased from 85 to 90. Reinforcement cost decreased from 28 to 6. Interesting. So the health increase, I think, is warranted with the 4 models. Reinforcement cost decrease is good. It's not that impactful, but it's good. Because these units, you only have 1 or 2 at max, right? Armored support battle group vehicle awareness range reduced from 160 to 60. Okay. And that's it for balance changes. Not a huge change, to be honest. I'm really surprised by some of these changes. Really surprised by some of them, but let's go ahead and look. I think the next update will have much more. I think this is relatively small. And there's a lot of things that they haven't changed yet. But bug fixes. There's going to be a lot of stuff here. Oh, not that much, but hopefully good ones. Fixed a high rate crash. Okay, yeah, I've been noticing more of that. Crashing art. Fixed an issue where the territory and map borders would flicker on the ruined signal player map. Wall sections should no longer remain visible once destroyed. Okay, good. Okay, something about the campaign. Gameplay. Units with no AA capabilities no longer acquire airplanes as targets. Good. That's really good. Thank you very much. Engineering units no longer take extra damage when repairing at Vet 3, as intended. Oh, interesting. I like that. Fix an issue where compromised armor did not properly apply to targets. Fix an issue where some bombing runs preview article was inaccurate. Fix an issue where the MG34 got a speed boost when using fire discipline ability. Okay. Fixed a text error that stated certain ammunition crates granted 60 when they only granted 40. Important change. Moved base bunkers to remove the ability to shoot resource points on some maps. Burst fire weapons no longer interrupt the current burst if the target is out of fire cone angles. Okay, that's important. MG34 fire discipline and Vickers plunging fire abilities can now be used in garrisons. Team weapons and emplacements will now grant shared experience. Interesting. Okay, the 15 CMP truck, anti-air truck now properly deals area of effect in a radius of 3. That's really cool. Okay, fix an issue where the 8 rad, half track, and Crusader Air were firing their autocannons faster than intended. It's the most important change. There was a bug here that was just too oppressive. Improve the hitbox of drop weapons to make it easier to pick them up. Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God. I would spend sometimes 10 seconds trying to pick up a weapon under fire, losing all my units, and then potentially the game, just because I'm trying to pick up a weapon on the ground. It was brutal, dude. That's good to see. Adjusted selection box from 1 to 2.5 on the German LG-40 recoilless gun. Fix the LG-40 recoilless gun to properly camouflage when its Vet 1 ability is used. Remove the wrong decorator from the tactical map for the LG-40. Okay, UI UX. Fix an issue causing loss of functionality when pressing ESC escape during hotkey remapping. Fix an issue where the LMG canister pressing fire ability did not display UI icon when active. All right, Daspulos, all good changes. And that's the only comments so far, but I would agree. I think these are good changes in the right direction. They missed a lot of things here, and I think they'll get them in the next update. The one that's just, for some reason, I can't get over this one. I cannot get over the change. This is the British changes. I cannot get over the change to the Stuart. I can't. I don't know. I don't know why. My favorite change is the Kettenkrad, if it's functioning like I think it is. I cannot get over the Stuart change. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was insightful. Let me know what you think about this update. This is a tuning update. It's relatively small. The next update will be much larger. Go ahead and let me know in the comments what you think. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. If you did enjoy this video, go ahead and smash the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. It goes a long way in supporting the channel. And I'll see you guys on the next one.